I served on a court that had judges appointed by every president from Carter to Trump. And the people I served with were some of the finest human beings I have ever met. They were brilliant. They loved the country. They were trying to do the right thing. They were trying to keep their judicial oath to be impartial. I never once, in my 15 years on the DC circuit, I never once saw a judge cast a vote or make a decision that was in any way tainted by their partisan political views. Judges just do not think that way.
As the cold winds of winter sweep in, there's nothing like the warmth of a comforting cup to help you slow down and unwind. This is the season. Let Postum be your cozy companion. Made from roasted grains, Postum is caffeine free and rich with a smooth roasted flavor. It's the perfect drink for those quiet, chilly mornings. Whether you're curled up with a good book, sharing a laugh with loved ones, or simply watching the snow fall outside, a cup of Postum is the moment you have been waiting for.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to This Week in Mormons. I'm your host, Matt, along with my sister, Melissa. And today we have a very special guest that we're interviewing. We're interviewing Judge Griffith. Judge, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, Tom Griffith. It is when I'm speaking to church audiences, I prefer brother or
Okay.
Tom to judge. I say Judge Griffith was invited; he couldn't show up, but Brother Griffith did. So, Tom or Brother Griffith would work fine.
Yeah, that's
Well,
great.
we need a more of an introduction than your name, though. I mean, you do have a pretty important big job. It's okay to talk about it.
And I'm an old man, and so there's a lot. So yeah, the judge thing comes from in 2005. I was appointed by then President George W. Bush to a court that's called. It's got a long name, the United States Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia Circuit, the D.C. Circuit, and no, it's a pretty important court.
Yeah.
It's the federal appeals court that sits in Washington, D.C. Here, lots of very interesting and important cases. I think it's probably best known for our alums. Right now, on the Supreme Court, Justice Roberts, Justice Kavanaugh, Justice Thomas, and Justice Jackson were all formerly on the D.C. Circuit, as were other people like Justice Scalia and other. So there have been a lot of. We're very proud of that a lot of our colleagues have been elevated to the Supreme Court. That's kind of the politics behind that are kind of interesting. You probably don't want to go into that here, but many presidents have used an appointment to the D.C. Circuit as a launching pad for going to the Supreme Court.
But I am interested in how a president finds out who you are. Like, how do you even get on the radar for that?
Yeah, so it turns out I'm native to Washington D.C. and most of my career has been there. And Washington's a pretty small town, as it turns out. And but I think probably the reason I got on President Bush's radar is for 4 years I was the chief legal officer for the United States Senate, uh, and so you get to know lots of senators, right? And it was a nonpartisan position. So even though at that time I was a Republican, I got to know and work with lots of Democratic senators, and so that was a little bit unusual, right? I was a conservative Republican who had lots of friends who were Democrats, and that was brought to the attention of President Bush. That looks like a good way to get somebody confirmed, and that and plus the fact that my best friend from law school was the number two lawyer in the White House, and he became my champion. So that reminds me, the old story. It's probably not true, but told about John Paul Getty, who in his own time was the richest man in the world, or something like that. And somebody asked him, "Oh, how do you become a billionaire?" And he said, "Well, you get up early, you work hard all day, and you strike oil, right?" So I was the Senate legal counsel, and my best friend was advising President Bush on judicial.
Yeah. I
So
mean, I don't want to discount all of the hard work you've done, but it is true that when I talk to like my children who are kind of at the decision making age in their life and they're making decisions like where to go to college or what job to take, I often tell them it's not really about where you go to school as much as meeting the people that you need to meet in your life
yeah,
to kind of take you the places that you need to go in life.
and I'll add one. You're absolutely right, Marcel. I add one thing to that, and that is be nice to people. No, really, be nice to everyone because you look. That's the way the Lord wants us to live. To follow Jesus, you'll be nice to people. But let's imagine, and none of your listeners would be people like this. Let's imagine you didn't care for 1 second about what Jesus wanted you to do, and the only thing you were interested was getting ahead. My advice to you would be nice to people because you never know what that person sitting next to you is going to become and how they can help you. So it's a good piece of advice. Listen, the important part is be nice to people because that's what the Lord asks us to do. But
Yeah. I wonder what motivates you to give up a lifetime appointment to the federal appeals court. It seems like it'd be a nice gig. Some
it's a
people
great.
on the Supreme Court do it till they die. Why would you leave?
So I had personal circumstances. My wife has a chronic medical condition that it just became untenable for me to stay on the court. So I stepped down so that I could be a greater help to her. But yeah, but for that, yeah, it's a great job. It's a great job. It's a great job.
I have another kind of I don't know if you want to get into this too much, but there are a lot of people I talk to that feel like the Supreme Court is a bit of a good old boys club, that some people have access to, kind of talk with people informally behind the closed doors, and that it's not an institution that's broadly trying to like look out for the broader public. I think you have more experience with both members of the Supreme Court, but also people in the judiciary than probably anyone our listeners would ever talk to. Is that your perception of how things work in Washington, D.C.?
Exact opposite. My perception is based on experience. It's the exact opposite of that. I wish, look, I was privileged. I was lucky to sit on this remarkable court for 15 years. And I just wish everyone could see what I saw day in and day out. I served on a court that had judges appointed by every president from Carter to Trump. And the people I served with were some of the finest human beings I have ever met. They were brilliant. They loved the country. They were trying to do the right thing. They were trying to keep their judicial oath to be impartial. I never once, in my 15 years on the DC circuit, I never once saw a judge cast a vote or make a decision that was in any way tainted by their partisan political views. Judges just do not think that way. You don't think I'm a Democrat, I'm a Republican, I want to try and help the Democrats, I want to help the Republicans. No, no, no. You leave all that behind. You take an oath. You take an oath where you swear to God that you will not do that. And I, and the people I served with, some of them were Christians, other Jewish, others secular, but they all took that oath seriously. It's remarkable. It's inspiring to me. I've never served on the Supreme Court. I have a lot of my law clerks who were hired by Supreme Court justices, and Washington being a small town, I just happen to know all of the justices. Your audience will be interested in this little detour here. But uh, during the open house before the rededication of the Washington D.C. Temple, I had the privilege of taking 6 of the justices through the temple,
Hmm.
the open house. Elder Cook and I did that. We got sick, and the only reason we didn't get the others is because they had scheduling conflicts and they were really disappointed about it. But so I, for better or for worse, I know these people. I know them well. I don't agree with uh, all of their decisions. I think they get something really wrong. But here's one thing that I am confident of: they're doing their best. They're doing their best. They may see things differently than I do, but I don't doubt their their good faith. A year ago, I moderated a discussion between Justices Sotomayor and Justice Barrett. This is in front of the National Governors Association, and it was a wonderful, at least for me, a wonderful experience. And one of the questions I posed to them was sort of what you were just saying. Okay, so what's it like behind, the closed doors? What are things like? And here's something that's pretty interesting. They have a tradition that whenever they sit as a court to hear arguments, and that's like 50 to 60 times a year, that they take lunch together in a dining room in the court with just themselves, no staff, just the 9 justices. And they have one rule, and that is they can't talk shop, no work talk. So, what do they talk about? They talk about sports, they talk about movies, they talk about travel, they talk about grandchildren, and as a result of that, they get to know each other. Now, I don't know about you. There's nobody I have lunch with 60 times a year,
No.
but they do. And they have these. So here's what comes of this. They really like one another. I mean, there's genuine affection. Once again, they disagree strenuously, but none of them doubts the good faith of the other. They just have different views about what the Constitution means or what the statute means. And again, I wish the American people knew that.
Yeah.
I wish presidents and senators knew that as well and treated them that way, but they don't. They treat them like they're just political players in robes. Sometimes the phrase is used, partisans in robes. And
Yeah.
I'm telling you, they're not. Now, when I say that to my law school students and when I speak at law schools around the country, and I say that, no one believes me. No one believes me. They must think, well, this guy's a fool. How can he say that? And maybe I am. I don't know. Maybe I'm a fool. I'm just telling you, that's what I saw. I was in the room where it happened in the D.C. Circuit, and that's what I saw. Um,
Yeah.
and Justice Breyer, Stephen Breyer, recently retired from the Supreme Court, is a good friend, and he says the same thing in public about his time on the Supreme Court. He said, no, it's not about trying to help Trump or trying to help Clinton. No, it's not about that. It's about trying to understand what the law means here, and there are difficult issues that they wrestle with. So anyway, that was a long.
Well, it's a refreshing answer because honestly, you're right. But that is not what we see as the general public. But that's really fabulous to know. Now, as far as you personally, are you known among your peers as a person of faith, as a member of the church?
Oh yeah. Not that I would ever want to hide it, but I
Right.
can't. My resume, I was the general counsel of BYU. I went to BYU as an undergraduate, and so no, it's I wouldn't want to hide it, and I couldn't. And so I'm widely known. The fact that I'm an active, believing member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is widely known.
This is
Yeah.
this is a little.
I get invited to things because of that. For example, a lot of law schools assume that because I'm an active member of the church, that I know a lot about the law regarding religious liberty. They just
Mhm.
assume that. The fact of the matter is, I actually don't. I mean, that's not an area of my specialty. But I get invited to all these conferences to speak about it, which poses a bit of a problem because I've got to study up and pretend. But that comes directly from the fact that we know he's a Latter-day Saint.
So this is a little bit of a side note, but this means that you went to BYU Law School before
No,
it had the.
I did not go to BYU Law School. I
Oh,
went to BYU as an undergraduate. I went to the University of Virginia for law school.
okay. So then this is another sort of question I have. In the most recent general conference, I think it was Sister, I can't remember her name. I think she's the primary general president, but she talked about her son that was applying for law school, and it was a prestigious law school, and he was hoping to get a scholarship. And they asked him who he admires, and he said Jesus, and talked about the Beatitudes, and thought that expressing his faith was going to make it so that he could never get into this law school and never get a scholarship. And so you actually reside in two worlds. You reside in like secular academia as well as Washington, D.C., which are two places that I think members of our church perceive to be anti the church and a place that's not welcoming to expressions of faith.
No, that, again, my experience has been the exact opposite of that. In fact, in my world, when people find out I'm a member of the church, they actually think better about me than they probably should because they don't really know me, but they make all these assumptions about me that I try and live up to. And I think a large reason for that is I'm the beneficiary of the example of Rex Lee. In our church world and at BYU, we don't really appreciate what a giant Rex Lee was. We think of him, oh, yeah, he was president of BYU and he did this stuff in Washington and stuff like that. And he's a funny guy, but no, in Washington, D.C., Rex Lee is like the gold standard of what you want to be as a lawyer, what you want to be as a human. And that's across the board. That's not a partisan view. He's just um, idolized. That's not the right word, but it's just so well respected. And when people find out that I have even the remotest connection with Rex, they think better of me. So in the world that I live, the legal world of Washington D.C., I have never felt that my membership as a church was anything other than a big plus, a big plus. So
Yeah.
Yeah. What does it mean to be general counsel for Brigham Young University?
So that's the chief lawyer for BYU. You're on what's called the President's Council, which is like the president's cabinet, 7 or 8 people that are sort of the senior administrators at the university. I was hired by Merrill Bateman and served under him, and then when he left and Cecil Samuelson became president, I served alongside him as well. But you're responsible for all the legal issues that arise at a university, which are many and always pretty interesting.
What
Yeah.
I've learned is they're the people you don't want to get an email from. When you get an email from the general counsel, you've
No,
usually
no, no, no. That's the wrong way to work it. I viewed my position as general counsel. I think this is true for most. Is you're there to help people figure out how to do the right thing and obey the law, right? And say, hey, the law requires this. Maybe we got to adjust our behavior to make certain we're in line with that. So yeah. So
That's
yeah,
true.
I guess if you get the email saying you're
You're
out
on
of
the wrong side of the law.
yeah.
Please
But
stop doing what you're doing.
it's mainly, there is some litigation. Sometimes BYU would get sued, and sometimes BYU sued. There's that part of it, but that's actually a minor part of it. It's mostly counseling and advising people about how to comply with the law. And in a place like BYU, that's what people want to do. People weren't saying, "Hey, how can we get around this?"
I know. They just want beards. That's all. They just want beards.
And some caffeine on campus.
Boy, there are a lot of people in plays these days, aren't there? A lot of people in plays these days. So anyway.
Do you have any like fun stories? Because I'm trying to think what sort of legal issues there would be. I mean, I could think of maybe things that might come up in athletics or with like employment or hiring, but do you have any interesting stories?
Oh,
That you can share.
yeah. See, that's the problem. Yeah, that's the problem because you have an attorney-client.
Mm-hmm.
So no, okay. So here's one. Let's try this one out. So when when President Bateman hired me, it was in August of 2000, and right before the election, the Bush Gore election, and I came from Washington. I had all these connections with folks in D.C., and then as it turned out, I had lots of friends who had very senior positions in the Bush administration, the Bush White House and the Bush administration, and President Bateman wanted me to take advantage of those to help advance the cause of religious colleges and universities in Washington D.C. To make certain that we were treated fairly and well. And so actually, that's what I spent most of my time doing. There was an office that I supervised, and I was involved in that. But most of my time, the lion's share of my time, was spent on these sort of projects of trying to protect the unique role of religious colleges and universities in American higher education. Because it used to be in the old days. I mean, we're talking about the 1700s, right, and the 1800s, that most colleges and universities were sponsored by a church. That's what it was. Harvard, Yale, these places were all started by people of faith. Over time, religious colleges and universities have become, minority of schools, but they still maintain a critical role. But it's one that's not often understood, and so BYU and other schools that have a strong faith commitment would sometimes have problems with the accreditors. You need to get accreditation by these bodies to make certain that you can get your kids can get Pell Grants and scholarships and so you had to be in line with that. And BYU would always get the accreditation, but sometimes we would face awkward questions where people just didn't understand, why we don't do certain things that other places do. And so I put together a coalition of religious colleges and universities, and the ones that you would predict: Notre Dame, Wheaton College, Pepperdine, Baylor, and I'm leaving somebody out. I can't remember. Sorry. And we put together a coalition that did spent a lot of time with the Bush administration, making certain that the rights of religious colleges and universities were protected. Okay, here's the end. I'm almost done with the story. What we wanted to do was to get a regulation from the Department of Education that helped us in this process. That in effect, in the accreditation process, said, "Leave them alone." Leave them alone on the religious stuff. It's okay. And so I because I had all these friends, I was able to put together all these really fabulous meetings. I mean, I go back to Washington, we were meeting with Karl Rove in the Roosevelt Room of the White House. It was very heady stuff. And yet we didn't get anything from the Bush administration. Good meetings, and I'd come back and I'd report to the president these memos about all these fabulous meetings we'd have, and everyone would say, "These are great meetings, Tom, but how about producing something?" And we didn't get anything from the Bush administration. Okay, hold on. But what we eventually got, and this is after I left, what we eventually got is we got an act of Congress,
Whoa,
a law protecting us, much more protection than you would get from the Department of Education. Now, here's the point of this. To do that, you have to have somebody in the Congress who's your champion, right? Somebody who's willing to go to the mat for you. And the person who is willing to go to the mat for BYU and other religious colleges and universities, take a guess. I'm going to play a game with you. Who do you think it would be? Don't think about it too much.
Someone
Mike
from Utah.
Lee.
Well, this is before Senator Lee was.
Oh, you're right. You're right. Okay, I'm out. I'm out of the game.
You say, well, Senator Hatch, right?
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, I would say
Bob
Senator
Bennett.
Hatch.
Senator Hatch
Bob
was
Bennett.
helpful. I love Senator Hatch. He was a dear friend, very helpful to me. But no, it wasn't Senator Hatch. It was Senator Edward M. Kennedy.
Wow.
Oh,
Kennedy from Massachusetts.
yeah.
Got it done for BYU and for the other schools because he cared. Whatever you think about his political views, and I had very different political views than Senator Kennedy, he cared deeply about religious liberty, and so he could go to folks who didn't care deeply about religious liberty, and he'd say, "Hey, these are my people. Okay, these are my people.
Yeah.
They may be crazy." He didn't say this, but they may be crazy, but they're my people. Invited to Thanksgiving dinner. I mean, it's that sort of thing. So anyway, that's my story. It surprises people that Ted Kennedy was the champion for BYU and for other religious colleges and universities. So that was fun.
So you mentioned before how members of our church sort of stand on the shoulders of giants who came before in Washington, D.C. The question I have is, what can members of our church do today to become their own giants, or
Yeah.
to do their own part in continuing the tradition of making a difference in our society?
That's a great question, and it's not something that we need to think about and pray about and deliberate, because we've been told exactly what we are supposed to do at this moment in American political life. We've been told. We were told by President Oaks in April 2021 General Conference, his talk, The Divinely Inspired Constitution. It's a great talk. We ought to study it and learn it, and we do. It's being taught aggressively at BYU and other places. But here's the money line of the talk. The heart of the talk is President Oaks says, on contested issues, we, Latter-day Saints, that's who he's talking to, we should seek to moderate and to unify. There it is. That's what you do. That's what we do. And so the question becomes, well, is that what I'm doing? Maybe I'm not involved at all. Okay, if I'm involved, I'll get involved. And now I know what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to be the one that gets people to stop yelling at each other. I'm supposed to be the one that gets people and encourages people to sit and to listen to each other. And yes, to compromise, seek unity. There's another phrase for this. President Nelson has told us this. It's to be a peacemaker. To be a peacemaker. No, that is our calling. I mean, I'm an old man. I can't remember any time when we've had more clear direction from the leadership of the church about the role we're supposed to play in American public life today. They're deeply concerned about the polarization that's going on in America right now, and it's serious. Social scientists tell us that the divisions that we're experiencing in America right now aren't just about disagreeing over policies. That's fine. No, we ought to disagree and argue about politics. We're Americans. My goodness, I don't trust any decision by anybody that isn't the result of disagreement, whether that's in the White House, the Supreme Court, or 47 East South Temple, right? Church headquarters. I want to know that everything has been thought through and discussed and reasoned over. So this isn't saying stop disagreeing with each other. What this is saying is get the hate out of it. And the social science data right now is really sobering. I don't know. I can't give you the exact figure, but it's something like this. It's something like this. Over 70% of Republicans think that Democrats are immoral. And it works the other way as well. I mean, it's about the same numbers. Democrats think Republicans are immoral. Well, wait a second. Wait a second. That's a little different than saying, your tax policies are bad, or your trade policies are mistaken, or, gee, I don't think you're interpreting, the Second Amendment the right way. We ought to have disagreements about that. But when you start to say, no, 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 you are immoral, you are evil, that our democracy cannot withstand that. It won't. It will not survive. Um, One of my favorite political commentators was a fellow named Michael Gerson. He was a conservative writer who passed away sadly a couple of years ago. And he wrote a column many years ago where he pointed out that the heroes of American history, are always heroes of unity. They're not the heroes of division. It's it's Abraham Lincoln. It's Martin Luther King. It's the people who called us to work out our differences together and to compromise and to accommodate. And those are the heroes. And Gerson also pointed out, he said, the Constitution can withstand vigorous disagreement. I mean, it was made for that. What it cannot withstand is a citizenry that holds each other in contempt. I got to tell you something. One of the most exciting things that I've seen in the last couple of years, I've had dozens of conversations with thought leaders political thought leaders in the United States who are not members of the church. And they all say the same thing. They say, you know what? The Latter day Saints can get us out of this mess. No, they really say that. They say we can, because you know what? They've been reading what President Nelson has been saying. They've been reading what President Oaks has been saying because it's different. It's not what you're hearing from a lot of faith leaders in the world today. A lot of faith leaders in the world today are picking sides, right? And they're deeply involved in the partisan conflict, and it's not helping. And yet, our leadership is saying something that's very different, and it is noticed, and people know it. People, thought leaders know who Russell Nelson is. They know who Dallin Oaks is, and they know what they're saying. They also know that we're really good at mobilizing people and getting them to do things. They know that. They know that we have a culture where our people work. You know, I was talking to one of them about this, and he was saying, "But how come you guys can get so much stuff done?" And I said, there are a lot of reasons. I said, notice something about our faith. I mean, the early Latter Day Saints were largely Puritan converts from New England, and they eschewed religious iconography. So when you come to our buildings, you're not going to see a lot of religious symbolism in comparison to others. But you know what? We actually do have one symbol that we use a lot: the beehive. Yeah. We're the people of the beehive. We don't build Chartres Cathedral, which I love, one of my favorite places in the earth. I'm glad it's built. No, we're the people of the beehive. We know how to build community, right? That's what we are really good at. And people know that about us. And they know that we're being taught to become peacemakers. And so, seriously, I have these fancy people come to me and say, you all can be the solution to this problem. Now that's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
I'm not going to share with you the names of the folks because these were private conversations, but your eyes would pop to hear who they are. So that's my this you get me going here. This is this is our moment right now. And we've been told by the president of the church and by President Oaks, who we all sustain as prophets, seers, and revelators, that right at this moment in time, here's what Latter day Saints are supposed to do. We're supposed to be the people who seek to moderate and to unify. And so I ask people, think of your latest social media post. First of all, I said, get off social media. But anyway, think of your social media post. And is that what you were doing? Were you seeking to moderate and to unify?
Yeah.
Or have you become someone who, Elder Lance Wickman, when he's now emeritus general authority 70, but for years he was the general counsel of the church until just recently. And I heard him say, and he's given me permission to repeat this. He said, too many of our people have traded their religion for their politics. And by that, he meant for too many of us, it's our politics that really get us going. That's what really gets the juices going. And I think Elder Wickman's right that that's a mistake. We have consecrated ourselves to the work of the church, and that's far more important than any political allegiance we have. And I say that as I'm a political junkie. I listen to C-SPAN radio. I didn't even know there was a C-SPAN radio. But I'm a junkie in this stuff, and yet Elder Wickman's right, President Nelson's right, President Oaks is right. My political commitments are way down the list in comparison to my commitment to help build the kingdom here on earth. And if my politics ever get in the way of that, put the politics aside. If my political views cause dissension in my ward, stop it. Stop it.
Okay, but practically, like, let's be really practical because I want a mic drop. Like, this was great what you said, but like, I feel like when you have a cause that you really care about, and I feel like especially young people today are very cause committed, right? They think that posting on social media is how you are an activist. And when you're sitting in Sunday school and somebody raises their hand and says something that's actually like crazy, like you feel like it's crazy, and then you think to yourself, well, I'm supposed to stand up for what's right, or I'm supposed to, advocate for people. How do you do it practically?
Yeah, that's a great question. So first thing you remember is that an hour before that person said that crazy thing in Sunday school, you were with them in sacrament meeting,
Right.
right? And the way we do sacrament is really significant. We pass it to one another.
Hmm.
Other faith traditions do it differently. The Catholics receive the sacrament, the Eucharist, they call it, from the priest, and that's huge significance to them about the role of the priest, and it's really important to them. That's not how we do it. We do it by passing it from one to another, and that's hugely significant to us. It should be, because that person who just made that crazy comment is somebody who I am bound to by covenant in Mosiah 18 to lift their burdens, to have my heart entwined with them. So that's the first thing that you remember, is that person is a child of God. Savior died and lives for that person as well. And so you approach that with that in mind. And so that doesn't mean you don't say anything, because when stupid things are said, they can hurt. They can hurt. Now,
Yeah,
some of the
it's true. It's true.
by when somebody says something hurts, but it affects our approach. And so I think we say something like, you know, Brother Jones, um, can I just offer a different perspective on that, and that is the way I approach the issue, and maybe that'll be helpful to you. It's just the tone that
Yeah.
changes everything. So
That
um,
was a great answer. I actually really love that perspective of we've covenanted to look out for each other.
and try this. So we all know John 17, Christ a prayer where he's about to enter into his passion, his suffering. He prays, and I think it's 17, 28, 29. We all used his missionaries, where he says he's praying for his disciples that they may be one, as thou, Father, art in me, and I in thee, that they may be one in us. Right? And we all know that, and we've used that to talk about the nature of the Godhead, to say, oh look, Jesus and the Father are separate and distinct beings. They're unified, yeah, but they're unified in the same way the apostles are unified, and they weren't just one. So we all use that, and I, used that for years. Well, somebody pointed out to me not too long ago, there's more to the verse than that. Keep reading, and the Savior prays for the unity of his disciples, that they may be one as us, as thou, Father, art in me, and I in thee, that they may be one in us, and then that the world might believe that thou hast sent me. What? What? He's praying for the unity of the church, because in Jesus' own words, the most powerful witness we can offer of his divinity is the unity of the church. And so if we're letting our politics get in the way of the unity of the church, that's a problem. Really, according to Jesus' own words, that's the most powerful missionary that we have, is the unity of the church. It's not the Book of Mormon. I love the Book of Mormon. Changed my life. I'm in the church because of the Book of Mormon. It's not temples. I love temples. It's all good stuff. It's not BYU basketball. I love BYU basketball. But that's not it. The greatest mission, the Lord tells us that the greatest missionary witness we can offer is unity in the church. And so therefore, Melissa, the way we approach that crazy comment is really critical.
Mm-hmm.
You don't leave it aside if it's hurting people, but boy, you do it gently and with love, because you just, the unity in the church
Hmm.
means everything. And it also means, so I've had, like I said, I'm a political junkie. I've been following politics since I was a little kid. That's probably not a good thing. I don't
Yeah,
know. But
that's weird. That's really weird.
I mean, I grew up in the DC area, and I went to public schools with the sons and daughters of congressmen and stuff like that. So that's just it's a company town, and that was that's the business. So I grew up with that interest, and I have strongly held views. No, I've been thinking about this a lot, and I'm pretty sure that I'm right. I'm right, but you know what? I'm not that sure that I'm right. I might be
Yeah.
wrong. I might be wrong. And I try and keep that in mind. One of my favorite quotes comes from Oliver Cromwell, the Puritan revolutionary, and this is from the 1600s. He says, and this is in like Old English, so I'll quote it that way. He said, "I beseech ye, in the bowels of Christ, think that ye might be mistaken." One of the greatest judges who never served on the Supreme Court was a federal judge named Learned Hand. Isn't that a great name? Learned Hand. And Judge Hand gave a speech in New York and at Central Park in the 1930s that used to be standard curriculum material for public school students in the United States until we stopped teaching civics. That's a problem. But anyway, it's called The Spirit of Liberty, and it's a great talk. I encourage everyone to go on the internet and find it. The Spirit of Liberty, and Judge Hand quotes that quote from Cromwell. That's where I got it from. But then he goes on to say that quote, and I'm going to be paraphrasing here. He said that quote, "Think that ye might be mistaken," should be emblazoned over every school, every courthouse, every legislature, every church, every place. That you need to be humble. That look, we're trying our best to figure this stuff out, but you know what? I might be wrong. And we could take a whole podcast where I could share with you the strongly held political views I had that I later learned. Hmm, I was wrong
Maybe.
about that. Yeah, oops, I was wrong about that. So therefore, I don't. I'm not the perfect example of this by any stretch of the imagination, but I have strongly held political views, but they're not as important as what I know about our heavenly parents and the Savior and what they're trying to do in the world through the restoration. That's what really matters, right? That's what really matters.
So if we get to political participation outside of church, because you mentioned before how you were in the room where it happens, where you're making decisions that matter nationally, internationally. And I think a lot of people feel like the best way to make a difference is to be in the room where it happens, where you said it's so remarkably unlikely that any of us will end up on the appellate court or something like that. Like,
Yeah, but they're more important places, and the most
yeah.
important places are locally. That's where real change starts. Takes a time, but it starts by getting involved in your town, in your county. Pick a party. I wish the system didn't run on parties, but for now it does. Pick a party that you're most comfortable with. You don't have to agree with everything that they say, but get involved that way. Be the look. We know how to work, right? And get involved in some project and just do what you would do normally. So here's a story. And he won't. I don't think he'll mind me telling. There's this great organization out there that I love, and I'd recommend everyone to take a look at this organization. They're called Braver Angels. Braver Angels. What Braver Angels does, it's a grassroots organization that tries to push back against the toxic polarization in our country. And they're really good at it. What they typically do is they have a meeting in a town where they will debate an issue. But their debates are a little bit different than what you see on TV. Half the room will be MAGA folks, and half the room will be Bernie Sanders supporters. I'm exaggerating that a little bit, but they try and get it evenly matched. And then they will debate. Okay, let's say they debate guns. They debate guns, but they have ground rules for how you do the debate, right? And they train you in this. And you got to listen to people. You got to speak respectfully. All these sorts of things. And then they have the debate. They have the debate about guns. And they've done this thousands of times across the country, and their results are pretty uniform. No one changes their mind about the issue. Like, no, the Bernie Sanders supporters leave the debate feeling the same way about guns that they did coming in, and so do the MAGA supporters, right? That doesn't change. But almost everyone changes their view about the other people.
Yeah.
Other people. And they realize, okay, you've got really crazy ideas, but you know what? You're a decent sort of person, you know? You're a grandparent. You love your grandkids. You're a patriot. You love your country. And so Braver Angels works at this, and they do really well. The church is actually quite supportive of Braver Angels in a lot of ways. My personal view is if someone were to try to put into operation what President Nelson has been teaching us about peacemaking, it would look a lot like Braver Angels. Okay, here's the point I'm making about this. Latter-day Saints across the country on their own are deeply involved in Brave Angels. It wasn't started by a Latter-day Saint. It started by this wonderful guy named David Blankenhorn. But David told me recently, what's the deal? We're getting all these Latter-day Saints helping out, and they're the best. They know how to work at this. So there's my pitch, not just for Brave Angels, but everything. Get involved in something. I would encourage you to get involved in something along the lines of peacemaking, because that's what we're told to do. Brave Angels is a great group. There are others, and just be a Latter Day Saint. Just do your calling. It's not a calling. Just do your job. And I think yeah, I'm going to make a broad statement that I don't have really any research to back this up, but uh, I think it's anecdotally, I think it's true. We don't realize what great skills we get just from being active in a ward. We don't realize it. Our experience in a ward is just so different from most people's life experience. I mean, think about it. Think about it. So you don't get to choose which ward you're in, right? You live here, so you go to this ward. So you may be going to church with people that you don't really like. They're not people that you would ever want to take to lunch, but now you got to go to church with them. And it gets worse, actually, better. Second, not only you're going to have to go sit with them in church, you're probably going to be in a calling with them, right? and you're probably going to be serving with them, or you may be a minister to them. So you got to go in their home. And so what happens is you discover this person whose music taste you abhor, whose politics you think are absolutely crazy, and now you're the minister to this person, and you find out slowly but surely that the Lord loves that person every bit as much as he loves for you. That he was thinking about him or her in Gethsemane and Calvary just as much as he was thinking about you. And that is the beginning of wisdom. We know how to do that. We know how to work with people who drive us crazy, because we do it every week in primary. We do it on ward councils. We do it on state councils, and we do it really, really well. So what I'm saying is we have skills that the world desperately needs. So that's the pitch. So just go and get involved and just be yourself. Just be your Latter-day Saint self. And so no, you do not need to be on the Supreme Court. You do not need to be in the White House. You do not need to be in the DC circuit. Those are nice
Yeah.
places, but that's not where real change is going to happen. Where real change is going to happen is in your town, in your village. That's where we get to work. That's where on contested issues, we seek to moderate and to unify. That's where we can do it.
So switching gears a little bit, usually members who've served in the House of Representatives have really interesting stories in this regard. But I wonder, do you have any experiences where you were able to, because of your professional position, you were able to help the church, either internationally or locally or something like? Do you have any fun stories about how you've been able to help the church professionally?
Yeah, so I think that what I referred to before was getting all the Supreme Court justices to
Yeah.
the open house. That was pretty cool.
Yeah.
That was really cool. So I volunteered to do that, and here's the fun part about it. So I sent out emails, personal emails, to them, and like everybody responded. with enthusiasm. But you know who responded first?
Who?
Justice Sotomayor. Let me
Wow.
tell you an interesting story about Sonia Sotomayor. Now, let me begin this by saying she and I have very different views about how to read the Constitution. I disagree with her a lot, and she disagrees with me a lot. Okay, so let's put that up front. But as it turns out, um, when she was sworn in as a justice on the Supreme Court, she was sworn in on what she calls a Mormon Bible.
Hmm.
I heard her say this in an interview. David Rubenstein, the philanthropist, was interviewing her on a show. Somebody sent me a clip to this, and he said, "So, Justice Sotomayor, tell me about the day you were sworn in to the Supreme Court. I guess your family was there, family Bible and stuff." And she said, "Well, yeah, my family was there, but actually, it was not the family Bible. It was a Mormon Bible." He said, "What?" And then she told the story that when she had been a district court judge, a trial judge, before she was an appellate court judge, and she had a case where the criminal defendant was a Latter-day Saint, and I don't remember what it was that he had done wrong, but he was guilty, and he was convicted. And part of her job as a judge was to figure out how much time he spends in prison. And so to do that, judges study up on the defendant. They want to know as much as they can about their background and their circumstances. And this guy was raised as a Latter-day Saint, and so as she was explaining to Rubenstein, she did this deep dive into what it meant to be a Latter-day Saint. And here she's in this interview saying, "And I was so impressed. I learned so much about the Latter-day Saints, and there's so much about them that." That I was impressed. And she said, and I said that in court when I was sentencing him. His mother was there, and a couple of weeks later, I get this box with what she said, a Mormon Bible. Now, I'm assuming it was a triple combination, or maybe it was a quadruple combination. But but anyway, that's what she had. So I had learned that about her, and before the temple thing, I sent her an email saying, "I heard you say this. This is really cool. Can I tell my people about this? Because we love this sort of stuff." And she said, "So absolutely." So I contacted Sarah Weaver at the Church News, and she contacted Justice Sotomayor, and they did a story about this. So I knew that she had this interest in us. So when I invite her, I send this email to her about the Temple Open House, and it wasn't 20 minutes before I got a response. And she said, "Oh, please, I'd love to. Can I?" Okay, so we did it. So then the day comes where we're giving her the tour. And Elder Cook, I was Elder Cook's junior companion, right? It was Elder Cook and myself, Elder Gerard, who was of the 70, Sister Arbuto, who was in the Relief Society presidency, and I'm probably forgetting some other folks I can't remember, were there. And we got to take her through the Washington, D.C. Temple. Now, I did this for 6 of the justices. The tour typically lasted about an hour or so. With Sotomayor, it was 2 hours because she stopped at everything. She said, what does this mean? And what does this mean? And finally, I had to say, "That's actually a file cabinet." No, I'm kidding about that. She didn't. It was almost. It was. I mean, she wanted to know everything. And we took, and for all the justices, we took them um, uh, to the celestial room, and we explained to them, when we go into the celestial room, we're not going to talk here, okay? We're just going to sit for maybe 10 minutes or so and just collect our thoughts. And that was, I have to tell you, I mean, these are people I admire because of their legal acumen, right? And I admire them because of their love of country and dedication to country. But I got to tell you, it was pretty special to be in that space and to see them sense the sacredness of, of, of the moment. I'll tell you what we did. Elder Cook taught me this. I got another minute to tell you this? I'll tell you what we did. He's such a good teacher. When you walk into the DC temple, after you go past the recommend desk, you see at the end of the hallway this large, beautiful painting of the Savior at the second coming. And it's really just him, sort of side view of him, and then you see the angelic host pronouncing his coming. It's striking. It's new. They used to have one. It was a little controversial. Second coming of Christ, and showed the bad guys on the
Oh
right,
yeah. Yeah,
left,
yeah, yeah.
you guys on the right, bad guys on the left, and it was a little disconcerting, right? At least
Right, right. Yeah.
maybe I'm revealing too much about myself. But the new one isn't. It's very positive. And so what Elder Cook taught me to do was we take the justices and their law clerks were there. We take them to that painting and we'd say, we're about to enter into the temple. Uh, Everything that we do as a Latter-day Saint in the temple, the covenants we make are all to help us help the Lord prepare the world for his return. That's what this is all about. So we'd start it that way. Then we go around the temple and talk about the covenants and stuff. And then you come back out, okay? You come back out of the temple, and as you come back out of the temple, as you walk across, there's a passageway that goes from the body of the temple to the recommend room, the recommend desk. And as you walk across that, there's another painting on the back. I'm not explaining this well, but it's on the back of the temple recommend room. And it's the last thing that you see before you go out of the temple. It's a new painting. I had never seen it before. And it's called something like He Heals Them All. And it shows Jesus in his mortal ministry healing folks. It's a really beautiful painting. And here's what Elder Cook taught me to do. I said, tell him we go in to help the Lord prepare for second coming by making these covenants. And then as we go out, we're reminded that's how we help him prepare for the second coming. We become healers of the sick, the brokenhearted, the troubled. That's what we do. And so when we leave the temple, that's what we're going to do. Now, is that a cool teaching or what?
Yeah.
That's
I mean,
amazing.
is that a cool? And so
Yeah.
I got to do that with each of the justices this
Yeah.
spring. It was so cool. Last story. I took Justice. This is my favorite part. I took Justice Elena Kagan through. No, once again, she's appointed by a Democratic president. I was appointed by a Republican. We have different views about stuff. But she loves Latter-day Saints. She loves Latter-day Saints. She's known a lot of Latter-day Saints. Just thinks the world of Latter-day Saints. So we've gone through the temple with her, and we're now out front waiting for her security guards to come pick her up, and they're a little bit delayed. So we're out there in front of the temple waiting, and I remembered that there was a gift that I was supposed to give her. They had prepared these really. It sounds a little cheesy, but there's actually nice. These little small note cards with pictures of the temple on it. It doesn't sound great, but it was really beautiful, really beautiful. And I was supposed to give her that, and I had left it back at the recommend desk inside, and I forgot about it. I said, "Oh, Justice Kagan, I forgot something. Don't leave. I've got a small token of our appreciation for you." She said, "Okay." So I run back inside. I get them. I come back out and I say to her, she's a pretty good friend. I can joke with her. And I said, Justice Kagan, I was thinking about what we could give you as a gift for you coming. And the first thing I thought of is we could send the missionaries to your house. And I said, no, but then I decided, no, I won't do that. And the next thing I thought was, well, we can give you a Book of Mormon. And I said, no, I'm not. But instead, I'm going to give you these cards. And she said, well, Tom, thank you very much for the cards, but I'd like a Book of Mormon. And I said, we can do that.
Wow.
Do that. And so a month or two later, I was able to go by her chambers. That's what a judge's offices are called, with a lovely heirloom edition of the Book of Mormon, signed by President Nelson, President Oaks, President Eyring, with a personal note inside. That was pretty.
Wow.
That was
Yeah.
so yeah. So I get to do some stuff like that.
I'm going to remember these stories when I have a friend that I want to share the gospel with, and I say, oh, they might not like me if I share the gospel with them, or you get all nervous. Oh, I don't want to give them a copy of the Book of Mormon. What will they think? I'll remember Brother Griffith gave a Book of Mormon to Justice Kagan. He invited all of them to the temple open house. Like, sometimes I am scared. I'm afraid to invite my friends to temple open houses, but
Yeah,
what a
this
great
was a
example.
wonder. No, I mean they were all gracious to come. Justice Thomas did not come, and uh, and so Justice Gorsuch was the first one to come. Then he goes back, and they have this lunch every day, and apparently at the lunch he's just raving about this. He said, Tom took me through. Tom and Elder Cook took me. It's the coolest thing. I hope the rest of you are going. And everyone else said, yeah, we've been invited. And Justice Thomas said, I didn't get invited. He did get invited. He said, I didn't get invited. What? Sotomayor was coming the next day. He said to her, will you tell Tom to make sure I get invited? So, so there was the talk of their lunch. And he got invited, but he couldn't come. He couldn't.
That's great.
I think he's actually been to other open houses, perhaps. Anyway, it was great. So what I enjoy doing is, because of this unique position I occupy, and again because I know people on both sides of the aisle. What I really enjoy doing is inviting my friends on the left to come see who we are, because we need friends on the left. I teach. I'm an adjunct professor that teaches at Harvard Law School, and I've made lots of friends there on the left, and several of them I've been able to invite out to BYU to speak, and they come to BYU to speak, and I got to tell you, BYU, that campus and those students, great missionaries, because these people come and they say things like, what am I feeling here? This is different. No, I'm not kidding. This is different than any other campus I've ever been on. And so these are people, on the left who and that's what I particularly enjoy. Folks on the right already know us and love us, right? Right. So a lot of them do. Folks on the left, a little less so. So I particularly enjoyed those relationships, getting those people to see who we are and come to love and appreciate us. So.
Well, Brother Griffith, it's been a delight having you on the podcast. I'm so grateful that we've been able to introduce you to our audience, and thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thanks for what you're doing. This sort of stuff is really, really important. It really is changing lives one at a time, and letting people know, hey, this stuff's really true. It's true. It really is, and we're fortunate to be able to play a role in it. So, thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Hey, listener, join us again next week.